Are there any Warriors fans in the house today? All right. So I don't know if you guys know this, but the Lakers are actually staying at this hotel. And apparently they're on the third floor, so right between where our sessions are being held. Actually, a few employees told me that they ran into a few of the Lakers on the way here. So, it's a pretty big day today. There's a big game happening. And, obviously the Warriors are going to have to, show a bunch of skills to get back from the hole that they're in. Which is kind of interesting, right? If you think about like sports, that is basically a place where skills really come into play every single day. And that actually transitions into what we've been hearing from a lot of our customers, right? Which is, what does it mean to be a skills-based organization? Every CHRO that we talk to today basically is asking this question, right? And is being asked this question from their leadership, from the board, about effectively how do you make this transition actually happen? So I want to actually tell you a personal story. I want to transport you back a few years, sort of at the beginning of the pandemic. I used to work for this company that is the world's largest rideshare company, right? And I don't know if anyone, I think there were in the previous session, there was this conversation that happened around sort of, regulation and regulators and how, they were trying to regulate ride sharing at one point. Well, in February of 2020, something really interesting happened, right? Which was the state of California sort of jumped ahead and decided to start shutting down effectively the way businesses would operate, which is people would wake up, they would go from point A to point B, and start working in an office. And suddenly, in February, that was not a thing anymore. And pretty quickly, what started happening, effectively, in just a matter of weeks, is a bunch of other states all across the US followed suit. And that was next followed by a bunch of countries all over the globe. And suddenly, the world's largest rideshare company had to grapple with the fact that people were no longer moving from point A to point B. And you're talking about a company that was operating of tens of billions of dollars of revenue every single month and was trying to figure out how to deal with this new reality that they faced. Now, interestingly, while all of this was playing out, right, besides the complete chaos that was happening at Uber, there's also this interesting trend that was developing, which was consumers that were no longer commuting were actually sitting on their, at home, pulling out their phones, and starting to order from restaurants. And that was the Uber Eats business starting to take off. Unfortunately, Uber was not a skills-based organization. And effectively, it had to make a lot of these decisions around people in a very rapid-fire fashion. And then, the rest is history. A couple of weeks later, thousands of people within the company were laid off, only to be rehired a few months later. Because it turned out that a lot of the skills that were needed to operate Uber Eats actually existed within the rideshare business, right? The same people that were doing customer success and customer support for many of the customers that were out there, the people that were actually utilizing that business, could now start to deal with restaurants. You could, basically take the skills that they had and apply them to the other business. Now, because this played out in this fashion, unfortunately, Uber was not able to capitalize on this massive change that was happening. And, if you look at it from the perspective of your businesses, maybe you went through some of the same things, but at a different pace. Now, the net result of this is that, unfortunately, if you look at the food category today, DoorDash is #1 in the US. And I think a lot of this could have potentially been avoided effectively if Uber thought more sort of strategically as a skills-based organization. So that's one of the examples I like to use from my past in terms of sort of why this is important. I know a lot of your companies have also been through a lot of change over the last couple of years. But this is one example which was extremely real. It played out in a matter of weeks, and it ended up in a place where I bet if Uber could go back in time, it would have embraced becoming a skills-based organization. Now, that's not the only type of challenge that companies face today, right? You have all sorts of challenges based on the way HR has been typically architected over the last few decades, right? You have situations with performance. You have the example that I just gave, which is laying off in one part, hiring in another part. HR has had to deal with all of these shifts related to the pandemic, trying to figure out the right policies when you try to bring employees back so that they don't actually, end up going to your competitors. And simultaneously, how do you ensure that you have a diverse workforce that is capable of meeting the challenges of tomorrow? All of these things have come down in the last couple of years almost simultaneously. And it's made it really, really hard for HR leaders to figure out how to navigate towards the future. The other problem, and if you just take into account the Uber example that I just gave you right now, right? When Uber was looking at its people, it basically saw them as roles, right? It saw customer success people as customer success people. It saw sales development people as sales development people. But if you could really peek under the hood and understand what are the skills that these people practiced on an everyday basis, you would start to see that there were a lot of transferable skills, right? The ability to interface with customers are very common between these two roles. The ability to actually prospect and reach out to restaurants is actually very similar to what many of the customer support agents were actually doing on an everyday basis when they were reaching out to drivers, et cetera. The ability to actually understand these skills completely change the way that you can see your talent. And that is something that we definitely believe here at Eightfold. Now, when organizations look at their people, they see they see roles, and they see departments, and they see competency models. A lot of this work has been done over the course of the last several decades at many companies. But actually, if you start looking at what do people do on an everyday basis, you will see it's teams that are actually collaborating across organizational boundaries. So there is the organization that exists on paper, and then there is the organization that effectively is in practice, which is a bunch of people with skills coming together and effectively working on projects together and delivering results for the company. But most corporations actually see their people in this fashion, which is hierarchically organized and effectively built around roles. And this makes it really, really hard to adapt to the kind of change in the example that I just provided. If this is how you see your organization, it's going to be incredibly hard when the next pandemic, the next major shift in the business, the next change in the economic cycle comes through. And that is effectively the problem that needs to be solved. There is the saying that we like to use at Eightfold, which is, you know more about an employee on day 0 than day 365. And the reason for this is that, I would say talent acquisition has taken the lead in many companies to really move towards a skills-based approach, where effectively when people come into the organization, you start to evaluate them. You basically run them through assessments. You try to really understand where do they fit in the job family that's been created and that they're being interviewed for. But by the time you get to day 365, something really interesting happens, which is your business changes, the roles that they may have been hired for maybe have shifted as new technologies and new developments come to the fore, and you start to lose sight of what are the new skills this person has gained and how you can utilize them in the future. And this is a really, really important challenge that we think should be solved. So the question is, how do we solve this problem? And that is effectively what we have been working on for the last several months here at Eightfold, and we believe that we can do this. So when you think about what does it actually take to solve this core problem that I just described, it really comes down to, number one, really utilizing the data that is out there in the world. The private data that exists in your applicant tracking systems, in your human resource information systems about your people, but then actually combining that with all of the data that exists on the public web, which is kind of how Eightfold got its start. And we built this really sophisticated AI model against it. That model has exposed what are the underlying skills that your people possess, your candidates that you're talking to, what are the skills that they're bringing to the table. On top of this, over the last couple of years, we have layered on the jobs intelligence engine. think of this as the ability for us to connect skills to roles and trying to understand what does it take to be good at any particular role in the organization at the granularity of skills, at the granularity of skill proficiencies. All of this is the underpinnings of our talent intelligence platform. This is the platform that serves all of these unique use cases across the organization, across the entire talent lifecycle, from career pathing for your employees, to learning and development, to upskilling, hiring for your recruiting teams. But today, we're going to take this platform forward into the workforce planning domain. And here's how we're going to effectively create a solution that can solve this critical problem of making that transition towards a skills-based organization. The first thing that we're going to enable is really understanding your market through incredibly deep talent insights. Understanding the present of any role and being able to understand how this role is changing in the current market. The second leg of the solution is understanding the evolution of any role at the company. We've had a number of sessions during the conference that have talked about the role of generative AI and how it is going to transform, all the way from game development to recruiting to software engineering. Obviously, this kind of, the ability to forecast how it's going to impact every role is critical to re-architecting your organization. I'm going to talk about how we're going to enable this on Eightfold. The third thing is, once you've done the modeling for the future of the organization, it really comes down to what does this actually mean when it comes to the people that you have within the organization today. And I'm going to show you some tools that allow you to effectively do this modeling and show the transformation that effectively you need to make. And then the last part of this, which is I think where a lot of organizations in the past have struggled, is the ability to actually execute this plan that you've built. And we're going to show you how to connect this to your talent acquisition and talent management processes so that you can effectively bring this whole thing full cycle and move towards becoming a skills-based organization. So let's start with the first part. I'm actually going to now give you an example, a real-life example, and I'm going to actually use myself here. So going back to 2004, I actually started my career as a software engineer. And yes, I did have some facial hair back then, as you can see. But just to give you an example here, this program that you see on the screen, the code was written in Python. I worked for this company that would ship product every 6 months or so. And by the time we would get to sort of the deadline, right, that we needed to hit, it always meant all-nighters. It meant lots of coding. And it meant effectively, lots of testing that would go into these cycles. Now, fast forward to 2023, besides losing the facial hair, I now have access to generative AI technologies that can effectively do the same job that it would take me days and days to do. It can effectively write simply by entering a prompt. And if you think this is science fiction, no, this is here today. I have several people in the technology, in my technology network that are actually going this route in terms of building software now, right? You have lots of examples where this is being used in production. It is being used to create the code for software that you will use on an everyday basis, going forward. So if this example doesn't convince you, that the skills to be successful have dramatically shifted, there'll be many more examples that you will see on an everyday basis. All the way from the example that Ubisoft just provided around how creatives are now using this technology to generate games. It is here, and it is being used on basically across many corporations today that are at the leading edge. So now let's talk about how we're going to make this happen. Yesterday, we announced skills-based talent planning as the solution that is going to help make this transition possible, right? Every single role in the world is going to be impacted by generative AI. So how do we enable the organization to make this transition across all of the different roles that make up any company? So the first part of this is our talent insights package that's going to be part of our skills-based talent planning solution. This is going to give you the tools to really look at any role and understand what are the underlying skills that are required to be successful in this role. So take, for example, a software engineer one role. In the world of today, what this can do is pull in data from your employees as well as the market. But in the future, what we're enabling is the ability to now layer on top of it real trends that are happening in the market. And you can see how any skill within this job is going to be impacted by things like generative AI. What is going to emerge in terms of new skills? What is going to be impacted in terms of skills that will be less used? And you can actually start to compare any role to, from present all the way to future. Do this modeling on our platform, and then store this within our jobs intelligence engine. What this allows you to do is, across the entire organization, take every single role, assess the impact on new trends like generative AI, like sustainability, and pretty much any other trend that develops in the future, and effectively prepare your organization to navigate towards the future. But we're not stopping here. The second leg of the solution comes down to creating a plan for the future. And again, Josh was up here a little earlier this morning. We borrowed his face again for this product. But now what you can do is to actually create a plan that navigates you to the future of the organization. So what you're going to see here in this example is the ability for me to future-proof the software engineering organization in the real example that I showed you. In one click, I can basically pull in the software engineering team, pull in all of the roles that make up the software engineering organization, the skills that are increasing, the skills that are declining. But we don't stop here. What you can now do is to transform the organization. So in this case, I'm going to future-proof it. And what you're able to see is that the roles that make up the software engineering organization are pulled into the system. We just did a future-proofing exercise on what do software engineers of the future, what are they going to do now that generative AI is here? Well, I can automatically pull that role in to the platform and then start to model my software engineering organization of the future. In this case, what the AI is doing is automatically bucketing people into who's ready for the software engineering role of the future today, who needs to be upskilled into that role, and who do I potentially need to hire from the outside. And what I'm going to show you next is that you can actually take human input and transform your organization in real time using this platform. What you're seeing on the screen is that all of the thresholds are actually controllable by your HR team. You can effectively set redeployment thresholds. You can set thresholds for upskilling, as well as who is qualified to move into the role based on our matching score. And the AI automatically buckets people in the organization based on who is future ready, who needs help to be future ready. And as you can see in the demo right now, we'll make those changes and the results update in real time. But it doesn't even stop here. What you can then do is decide who fits into what parts of the organization, who should be redeployed to other parts, who can be brought in from other teams into the software engineering role now that that role has changed fundamentally, given the new technologies on the scene. And then you can even take some people and put them into an upskilling plan for the future. So you're being much more strategic about developing your talent for the future. And once you've done that, the plan automatically updates. It shows you the future of your organization. It starts to get to a point where you start to connect the dots between the financial plan that has been set by the CFO and the people plan that the CHRO owns. All of this is now fully connected, and then you can take the last step of conforming this plan. Obviously, this would be great if we stopped here in the experience, but we know as effectively practitioners, you now have to then drive this transformation through the organization. And what this will allow is for employees like Elena, giving her the ability to see what are the upskilling plans that she has been assigned by the organization so that she can upskill into the software engineering role of the future. So in this case, what she's able to do is to click on the plan and actually start it. So she can start building towards becoming the software engineer of the future that this company needs. So whether it is a particular course, a sequence of courses, mentorship, or gig work that can allow her to build the skills that she lacks today, that is all going to be present in our platform, and basically making it possible for Elena to upskill into the software engineer of the future. A final piece of this is also that we're going to enable this capability for your recruiting teams. So when a recruiter comes to this experience, they will have the ability to see the employees that were identified for redeployment across the organization. Every single role will have the ability within every pipeline to see who are the employees that match that particular role. And in this fashion, you can take what we have built and transform the organization both from a talent management as well as the talent acquisition side of the house. So to summarize, what this solution really allows you to do is to understand your market, understand the evolution of any role within the organization, plan for the future of the organization, and to actually execute that plan through talent acquisition, talent management, and very soon through Talent Flex as well, and bringing the organization towards the skills-based organization of the future. So that is a transformation that we're going to be enabling for all of our customers, and we're super excited to bring it to market. But before we go today, I actually have one more thing to share. So I know we covered generative AI in the example, but generative AI is not simply going to impact your employees. It's also going to impact your HR organization. And so what I wanted to do today is to actually give you an example of how Eightfold is imagining bringing generative AI as a solution to every one of your recruiters, every one of your employees, and every one of your candidates. And I'm going to start in this example with how it's going to impact your recruiting team. So this is our talent intelligence copilots that we have just launched. I don't know if you've had a chance to go and see some of these in our demo screens that are outside, but if you haven't, please go and do that. But let me show you an example of what the recruiting workflow of the future is going to look like. In this case, the recruiter is interacting with our copilot and asking it to filter this pipeline with candidates that are simply in Palo Alto, which is where this job is based. And then, as a next step, what the recruiter can also do is interact with the conversational interface that exists. And instead of navigating off of the screen, the recruiter can get a very quick understanding of who are the people that can potentially do this job. In this case, Juanita has been someone that's been selected. And the copilot can even compose a really engaging email that can invite Juanita to actually apply for this particular job. We can share these candidates with the hiring manager. And as you can see, all of this takes just a few seconds. It's not a question of taking sometimes the minutes or hours that it takes to do these workflows. It is now reduced to a few seconds. And all of these workflows are going to be automated with our Copilot capabilities for hiring managers as well. And finally, I know that in the session yesterday, Commissioner Sonderling mentioned writing job descriptions. That is a capability that we also offer in the solution with our Copilot. But one thing I will mention is that it also takes into account diversity, and as you can see, it'll make sure that there are no errors made when it comes to writing job descriptions that may discriminate against anyone. All of these capabilities are available within our platform. We're super, super excited to bring this to market. And we hope that many of your teams start adopting this and becoming the HR department of the future, utilizing our Copilot technology. With that, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for attending the conference. And if you do run into the Lakers, just let them know.